clear that I know that there are protests still happening in
Yes.
major cities across the United States. I'm just not seeing the reporting on it that I
Right.
had
That's right.
for the first few weeks.
That's right. But they're not going to
Now,
stop. They're not going to stop. And they're not, this is a movement, I'm telling you. They're not going to stop. And everyone beware, because they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop before Election Day in November, and they're not going to stop after Election Day. And everyone should take note of that on both levels, that they're not going to let up, and they should not. And we should not.
Welcome to Prophecy Views. I'm Brian Barton. We're here again with Mike Ray. And if you haven't caught us already, you can support this ministry at prophecyviews.com. The other thing I want to bring your attention to is we've started a podcast of more daily or more frequent intervals. As topics come up, I'm able to come to you as a podcast form because it doesn't take as much setup effort and things of that nature to get a video rolling as it does to get people together and get topics together and get the set rolling. So podcast, I can simply do it from wherever I'm at and pull my thoughts together and hit record. But you're really going to want to stay up to date on this stuff because there are things exploding in the Middle East that could very well launch the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon. And I know that's a pretty big statement to make, but if you keep up with what we're doing and what we're talking about, and we're going to cover that topic at the end of this video with the Abraham Accord that is ringing through the Middle East right now. Yeah. But I want to start off with a video that we just saw of Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
So you just saw the words of Kamala Harris saying these riots are not going to stop and they should not stop. Right. So it appears to me, which has been obvious to me for some time, but this puts the proof to it, additional proof, that the Democrat Party really is behind the riots.
Yes.
Now, one thing I do want to point out, and I'm not sure if it's still this way, it's been a couple of days, but a couple of days ago, if you went online and typed in www.antifa.com, you would go to the Joe Biden and Kamala Harris donation page.
It redirects you to their homepage, yes.
Now, the question back at that time was, well, even a conservative could buy that name and make it look like it's connected to the Democrat Party by doing that. Yep. So Fox News and a couple of other outlets have directly asked the Biden and Harris campaign, and they are ducking the question. It is obvious that they are in support. So this video you just saw confirms that.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing is, when I listened to this video, she mentions 4 times that the riots are not going to stop. And the ex-Vice President Biden has said that if I don't win, then the riots are going to continue. If I don't win by a landslide, the riots are going to continue. And I'm thinking this is extortion at the highest level. And it kind of surprised me that he would say, someone at his level would say something like that, but then Kamala Harris, his running vice president, his running mate, is saying exactly the same thing, that she supports these riots. What American would want to support riots? She calls them protests. I'm calling them riots.
One of my friends on Facebook had a post the other day that said, and you know, if you remember, all of this goes back to, or supposedly originally started with the George Floyd death.
Yeah.
And so this post was basically in regards to that. If somebody comes to burn your place down and you kill them, that's justified.
Right.
But if you kill somebody and you don't expect us to burn your place down. But here's the problem with that, and that is their line of thinking. One, if it can be one way, then the other way is okay. The problem is, just take for instance the man's furniture store or the camera shop that was burned to the ground in Minnesota. Now, what did they have to do with anything?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's fear mongering. The thing is, you got to be careful about this. Defending yourself, so to speak. Every state in the United States has different laws in regards to this. You need to study it. It's very convoluted, very convoluted. Texas is not so bad. Uh, you know, if you threaten me, especially I'm a senior citizen. If you threaten a senior citizen, you have committed a felony, and a felony authorizes a person to use deadly force. But then on the other hand, you've got to realize that there are 12 people in the jury, and they might say, hey, you know, even though he threatened you, you shouldn't have shot him. And the next thing you know, you're in prison. You've got to be careful. But here's the thing about these protests, and I've said this once before, I said it the last time. There are wolves in sheep's clothing. There are honest, sincere people that are protesting peacefully. But intermingled in with them are the wolves.
Yeah.
And when the peaceful protesters start to leave and dissipate, then the wolves come out and they start rioting and looting.
And I think Bill Barr addressed that. Before we move
Yes,
on
he
to the
did.
next topic, the thing that I found really interesting, and we don't have it loaded for this interview, for this discussion, but Bill Barr interviewed with Laura Ingraham on Fox
Yes,
News a couple
right.
of weeks ago. And I would really urge you to just look up that simple interview, William Barr interview with Laura Ingraham. And he told her, we know names. And Donald, oh, I'm sorry, I believe this interview was with President Trump, not William Barr. And he told her then, we know names of people that are behind funding. These rioters are flying all over the country to riot.
Yeah, they're not from the same state and cities.
And they don't have the money to do this stuff. Somebody is funding it. And it appears to us from some of the things that William Barr has said and the president has said, they know who they are and they're just putting a case together.
Well, that's the thing. 100 days. 100 days. I can't go 100 days without eating or paying my bills or any of this. These people are being paid. Now, here's the thing. You want to stop the riots? Seize their accounts. Take their money and pay those people affected by the riots. The businesses that have been burned down, the arsons, the people that have been assaulted. Pay them from this. Take their money.
That's a good idea.
Seize their accounts because they're using extortion. They're using arson. These are felonies.
Absolutely. One of the topics that we've been talking about for quite some time, and we just haven't come to video with it yet, is mail-in ballots. Because the video that we just watched of Kamala Harris really ties into the mail-in ballots, because they know the only way they're going to win, especially with a candidate like Joe Biden. And I'm not telling anybody how to vote. I'm simply not doing that.
No.
But with the candidate they've got like Joe Biden, they know they're not going to win.
Yeah.
And so they are heavily counting on, I think, between coronavirus and scaring people to death with riots.
Yeah.
They're trying to get them to stay home.
And there are actually on certain. I've seen it on Facebook the other day. Some Democrats that are big, huge sign showing that they support Trump.
There's a big
over
movement.
Biden because of what they stand for. Personally, I cannot vote for a Democrat. Period. The abortion thing is a big with me. But there are other things. This one that we got coming up, the video coming up pretty soon, is the clip. To me, is very, very parallel to the Democratic Party now. The Democratic Party in 1960s was vastly different than what we've got today. Back then, Democrats and Republicans can debate peacefully. This is not peaceful debate.
I haven't ever thrown this question at you before. If JFK were here today and going to decide to run for president,
Yeah.
what party would he be in?
I think he'd be in the Republican
I think
Party.
so too.
And I tell you another thing. I think his head is hanging down. I think he is ashamed of how the Democratic Party has changed into communism. It's no longer socialism. They're talking flat out communism.
So the only way that the Democrats know they can win this election is
Through threats and intimidation.
Well, really through manipulation.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's another. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so my point would be, if you go to so we're talking about this mail-in ballots, the mail-in voting. You go to vote in person. You tell them who you are, and in a lot of states, you prove who you are. They look in the system and they go, yes, you are eligible to vote, and according to our records, you have not voted yet, absentee or whatever.
Right.
So they then hand you a ballot, and that is the last time an individual, other than yourself,
Touches it.
sees that ballot, as far as seeing the markings on it or anything of that nature, sees that ballot or touches that ballot.
Right.
Every time, and I've worked an election, you vote in secret. You're not. Nobody's allowed. I've seen people take their kids in to show them how they vote, but really nobody's allowed to go with you to vote into the booth. You walk out of that booth. Your ballot is shielded in a shield, and you take it over yourself and you feed it into that machine.
Yep.
With mail-in ballots, you have no way of knowing, number one, who filled that ballot out. You can't prove it.
Right.
You have no idea if anybody has touched that. You know people have touched that ballot other than yourself.
Right.
Because even if you take it to the post office yourself and mail it,
There are many handlers.
it's going to go through many handlers
Yeah.
before it gets to, and you know, people that, I'm not trying to point a finger at any one person, but there are already stories out there from previous elections where, and we're going to look at this video, well, we're going to look at a different video than what I was just thinking about in my head, but there's a video out there of a young man that was with the Bernie Sanders campaign. And you and I have watched this clip, not the one that we're talking about here, but a different one,
Right.
where he says how they manipulate thousands and thousands of votes.
That actually had mail carriers, and I hate to say this because I think the mail carriers got a hard job, but there are actually some people that are they've got an attitude problem, and they just take the whole ballot pack in bundles and just throw them in the trash.
And if you're doing that from a heavily Republican district,
It's not right.
you know that the votes you threw away were mostly Republican.
You see, that's the thing I'm talking about, the Democratic Party right now. It seems like they are so angry and so bitter about what? We are in one of the greatest eras in American history. More people got jobs than they've ever had before. The black community has been escalated in the job market. And in being able to buy a home, to be able to clean up their community than ever before.
Right.
Why are they angry?
Yeah, I agree. Now, this video that we're going to watch, this clip that we're going to watch, what this is them. This is an Axios interview.
Yeah.
With a gentleman that's with a. I'm trying to remember the name of the campaign or the organization that he's with. It's heavily funded by a gentleman that ran for president on the Democrat Party. His name is escaping me right now, but he's Mike Bloomberg.
Right.
Was it Bloomberg?
Bloomberg.
That doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
But he has funded this organization, and everything leans towards the Democrat side, which is fine. But they're coming out and they're telling us, they're laying their ammunition on the table.
Yep.
And they're telling us that there's a red mirage. Listen to what he says on this video, how he describes what we see on election night may very well not be what we end up seeing. Let's take a look.
A mirage, by definition, is something that appears to be there, but that doesn't really exist. And you have a model scenario called the red mirage. What does that mean?
The reason we talk about a red mirage is, in fact, because we believe that on election night, we are going to see Donald Trump in a stronger position than the reality actually is. We are sounding an alarm and saying that this is a very real possibility, that the data is going to show on election night an incredible victory for Donald Trump. That is likely to be what we see when every legitimate vote is tallied and we get to that final day, which will be some day after Election Day. It will, in fact, show that what happened on election night was exactly that, a mirage. It looked like Donald Trump was in the lead, and he fundamentally was not when every ballot gets counted.
And so we see they're talking about this red mirage.
Yeah. I don't want to call it a mirage. I want to call it an illusion. An illusion. That is exactly what this guy is saying. He's saying he is creating his mirage or illusion to make you think that the numbers are sliding in one direction when it's a lie, to get you to panic and hopefully get you to go out and get people to vote for your side. That's dishonesty at the forefront. And that why?
But don't you also think that come the end of the night, election night, or early the next day, they're going to have a pretty good idea of the numbers they need to come up with to cheat?
Yeah, exactly.
How many elections have you and I both witnessed, being larger elections, the presidential ones,
Yeah.
where all of a sudden, this is 4 or 5 days after the election, they're still counting for one reason or another,
Yep.
whether it was in 2000 with George Bush,
Yep.
and
Then there was
that's
the
when he
thing
ran with Al Gore, right?
Who was
Ballots were showing up in trunks of cars, and even though the right side media would throw up a red flag and say, hey, this guy is backing his Ford Taurus up and unloading boxes of ballots
Yeah.
into the courthouse.
Yeah.
What is this? These aren't even secure.
Yeah.
But nothing was ever done about it. No, everything's fine. And all of a sudden, the Democrat count would run way up.
Barr was even talking about something that hasn't happened in a long time, but he was worried about it now, about people selling their votes. And I thought, what? And Barr is pretty top notch. If he's heard this, then
then he already knows.
there's something going on.
Yeah.
There's that. There's the fact that people can falsify, or you can get one guy in an office and he sit there and fill out 15 mail-in ballots. Now I'm not talking about the absentee. I'm talking about the mail-in ballots, and just fill out 15 of them and send them in. And he could be going to a cemetery and picking out names.
Yeah.
Or maybe his dog.
Well, and the problem is the courthouses are mailing ballots in some places. A lot of places it's been blocked.
Yeah.
But in some states, they just mail to every voter on the voter rolls.
Yeah.
So I may get a ballot, Brian Barton. I may get a second ballot with my middle initial in it.
Yeah.
Or a third ballot with a misspelling of my name,
Yeah.
and somehow that's at
Yeah.
the polls. And I'll guarantee you, whoever lives at my place in Illinois, where I'm from, probably would get a ballot with my name on it.
Yeah, and here's another thing. When I go to a poll, I give them my driver's license.
You're not allowed to in Illinois.
In Indiana, or in Texas, you have to show it. You have to show a photo ID, and they look at the picture. They look at my ad. Are you still at this address? Yes, I'm still at that address. And my driver's license in the upper right-hand corner has a gold star. That means I have paralleled my driver's license with my passport.
Yes.
They know exactly who I am, and they mark it down. This man is voted today at this time, and they know. But with a mail-in ballot, I'm not talking about absentee ballot. I'm talking about mail-in ballot. With a mail-in ballot, they don't know until it gets to them. And you got to realize, sincerely, sometimes, without anybody's fault, mail gets lost.
Sure.
I don't know how many times I've, in 40-some years, 50-some years, that I've actually mailed in a bill and it didn't get there. And honestly,
I want to tell you a story, and take this to heart at home when you're watching this. I mailed a check to my bank for several $1,000s, my bank in Illinois, just the other day.
Yeah.
It's been almost 2 weeks.
You
They still don't have it.
Yep.
Now, my banker and I politically are on about the same page, so I was teasing him by text message.
Yeah.
And I said, my ballot was also in that same envelope, and the post office says it's secure. But I was just joking about my ballot being in there. He texts me back and he goes, this is what I tell people, and this is what I'll tell you at home. If you trust mail-in ballot so much, mail-in voting so much, you trust the post office that much, put your money where your mouth is. Go to the bank, draw out $5,000, cash. Lick it, put it in an envelope, and mail it to yourself.
And see if it gets there.
And see if how well you feel in your stomach when you put that $5,000 in that drop box at the post office.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you'll feel a lot better when you finally get it back in the mail. There may be one or two cases of people out there. Don't actually do this because I don't want to be responsible for it. But you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They tell you not to mail cash in the mail for a reason.
Yeah. When I write a check and mail it, I take a piece of paper and I fold it around the check so that people can't look through it and see something.
Yep.
Because people are people. People are normal. They're not machines. They have emotions, and sometimes we have, lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, and pride of life.
Yeah. And it's happened many times.
Woohoo!
I want to wrap this segment up before we go into the last segment. But the thing that I would point out is I will go with Scripture every time.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of Scripture that indicates how this presidential election is going to turn out.
I agree.
We are so close, folks, to entering the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon, that the Scriptures that I'm going to refer to here in just a second, the time frame that these Scriptures are talking about are barely ahead of us now.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to back this up, and if you've listened to my podcast, you're already a step ahead. But I'll point you to Revelation 12 and 14, and it's talking about how God will give the nation of Israel 2 wings of a great eagle, that she'll be protected and nourished
It's us.
in her place, in her promised land, for a time, times and half a time, from the face of the serpent, I believe it says.
Yes.
And the serpent being the Antichrist,
Yeah.
who will be possessed by Satan at that time, possessed by Lucifer. So my point is, the nation of the United States as a nation will be protecting the nation of Israel during that final 3.5 years.
Yep.
And it's going to take a president with a lot of backbone. Does not care what the United Nations says, is going to do it anyhow. And I'm going to add one more scripture to it, and it's a set of scriptures. Just go one more chapter, flip the page to the next chapter. Revelation 13, verses 1 through 8, talks in a description of the UN government one world beast that the Antichrist will control. And it depicts the feet of the bear, the body of the leopard, the mouth of the lion, the 10 horns of the 10-horn kingdom, which we know is a 10-nation alliance out of the European Union,
Right.
out of the EU, the old Holy Roman Empire. But what's missing from that depiction in that beast? The eagle's wings that you see in Daniel 7 are not there. And we saw them back in Revelation 12:14 protecting Israel.
Yes.
So it's very easy to see that the United States will, and we already have, we've pulled back from the UN heavily. Now we're still a member, and I don't necessarily think we need to give up our membership to fulfill that prophecy.
Right.
But we are not going to be part of this one world government beast. We're going to stand alone, and we're going to protect Israel when it's not going to be an easy thing to do.
The only thing that is good about us being associated with it is the fact that we have a veto power.
And we have a say.
And we have a big say. The other thing is that look what President Trump has already done. He's moved the embassy to Jerusalem.
Yep.
He has now got come up with an Abraham Accord.
We're going to talk about that in just a minute.
Just a minute.
You're getting ahead of me. It's okay.
I'm getting ahead of us. He has come up with a peace plan, and he's focusing on the Emirates side, trying to pull in Saudi Arabia and all of those surrounding countries. And right now there's a situation going on with Turkey and Oh, it just went right out of my head. Where they are trying they're trying to lessen the tension between Turkey and another country. There is peace being spread in the Middle East. Who would have ever thought that? Mm-hmm. And this is by the direction of right now of one man. And this is one of the reasons why we believe that he is going to win a second term, because of his alliance with God's people.
Well, and the flip side of that coin, which I simply wanted to point out, was any other candidate that you look at is going to lock us in so tight to the United Nations because they've seen what Donald Trump has done and they don't like it. No. This one world government does not like how the United States has pulled back. And so, and I would even go as far as to say, and I've said this many times, I don't think we'll see the old establishment type, George Bush type globalist Republican in the White House. Again. So I don't think we're going to see an establishment Republican or a Democrat for sure in the White House, because we would not be able to fulfill Revelation 12:14 and the first eight verses of 13.
Yeah, the thing is, this accord that he's talking about, if you bless my people, I will bless you. If you curse my people, I will curse you. You want to know why we're so prosperous for the past 4 years? It is because we have been blessing Israel.
I agree, totally.
And we're not cursing Israel. Let's go all the way. I don't want to run out of too much time. Go all the way back to the Carter administration, when Carter is persuaded or deluded Israel into giving up the Sinai Peninsula, land for peace. What happened? From that point on, things started going down. Why? Because they gave up their inheritance.
That's right.
When you bless Israel, you get a blessing yourself.
Let's go into this last segment here.
Yes.
And I told you in the beginning to stick with us. I would encourage you also, while I have a minute, visit us at prophecyviews.com. Give this ministry support. We are getting so close to wrapping things up on God's time clock in this end of the age, as you would call it.
Yep.
That ministries like this truly need your support.
Yes.
So please visit us at prophecyviews.com and ask God what he would put on your heart for that. But I'm going to use that as a segue into why I think this is so important. We're going to play a video here, and it's only about 30 or 40 seconds. And we've talked about the Abraham Accord with the United Arab Emirates and Israel back just a few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Right.
Very recent. And we knew then from what they were saying that they were already talking to other nations. Now, what we are looking for, the Antichrist must come out of the Holy Roman Empire, the old Holy Roman Empire,
yes.
The European Union, if you will, now. Mm-hmm. So we know that, and we'll get into that at some point in time. But it definitely tells us that the Scripture tells us that the Antichrist has got to come out of the European Union.
Right.
So this Abraham Accord appears to be exactly the type of the peace agreement that we're looking for.
Yep.
But we're looking for European nations to start signing on to it. But it appears that a lot of the Mid-Eastern nations are going to sign on to it first.
Right.
So right now I'd like to announce the other day, and I did a podcast on this, the Trump administration announced normalization of ties, or a peace agreement, if you will. It's all part of this Abraham Accord between Bahrain and the nation of Israel. Now, this clip that we're going to play is during this announcement of the peace agreement between Bahrain and Israel. And this is Jared Kushner talking, and he's one of the delegates of President Trump.
Yes.
That is putting all these peace deals together in the Middle East on behalf of President Trump. This is a very urgent topic for the president. And this is from Fox News, a Fox News video clip. But what I want you to pay attention to, I think he does the best job of any short clip that I've seen of summarizing what we've seen up until today, or within a couple of days ago, because this was announced a couple of days ago. But I think he has done the best job in a 30 or 40 second clip of summarizing what's been going on just in the last little bit and summarizing it. But I also want you to pay attention to the very last thing he says, how we have delegations throughout the entire Middle East that are still working on other nations and putting other countries into this peace agreement. Let's take a listen to Jared Kushner and what he says.
I just returned from the region last week. I was in the Middle East, where I took the first commercial flight that's ever flown from Israel to the United Arab Emirates. That flight flew over Saudi Arabian airspace. It was the first time in 72 years that Saudi Arabia has now waived their airspace to allow commercial flights to fly from Israel back and forth. Bahrain then did the same thing. The United Arab Emirates waived a 48-year boycott on Israel, which was an incredible development. And there are now delegations moving throughout the Middle East, figuring out how to bring the people closer together.
Wow.
So we just heard Jared Kushner summarize this entire laundry list of stuff that has just happened really in the last week or two.
Right.
Flight coming from Israel to the United Arab Emirates, first ever.
75 years. 75 years was the Nate. 75. That's the beginning of flight. That's the Orville and Wilbur guys. I mean, come on, 75 years. They were like 100 years, but you know, I'm talking about commercial flight.
Right.
Wow.
Well, that's the first time since
Ever.
since the nation of Israel was founded in 1948.
48. Yep.
And they had to fly through Saudi Arabia airspace with their blessing and Bahrain.
Yep.
So now we've seen Bahrain come on board with this.
Yep.
And we talked about this the other day. I think Saudi Arabia is, I don't know if they're going to be next in line, but I think they're right at the top.
I think that they're waiting to see what everybody else does.
And the Trump administration is dangling possibilities of them buying some F-35s.
Yep.
But one of the things that was mentioned, and I think this is curious, and we're getting close on time, so we're going to wrap it up here pretty soon, but folks, remember how important this is.
Yes.
One of the things that Donald Trump proposed was for Saudi Arabia to potentially take over the status and protect, and this Temple Mount itself would fall under Saudi Arabia control.
Instead of Jordan.
Well, I believe it's going to take a shakeup of some sort. We know that there's going to be a third temple built. The Antichrist cannot stand in the temple of God, claiming to be God,
Right.
if there is no temple. There has to be a temple.
There has to be a
And
temple.
something on the status quo is going to have to change
Yep.
for them to be allowed to build that temple. And the Palestinians are going to be outraged at it.
Yes, they are.
And so we're seeing this picture of the Palestinians being dragged into this peace agreement against their will. We know it's going to end with the Israelis, I shouldn't say end, but it's going to eventually lead to the Israelis building their third temple on the Temple Mount. And the Palestinians are outraged
Yes.
to even think about that. And so all of a sudden, at that point, we would have already been into the final 7 years. And now, something about that halfway point where the Antichrist stands in the temple of God, stopping the animal sacrifices, claiming to be God, something about that draws the ire and outrage, and it's the straw that breaks the camel's back with the Palestinians, and they overrun the Jews that live out in the West Bank and slaughter them.
I honestly believe that what will break all of this, when he stands, he, being a European, not a Jew, goes into the holy place, not the outer court, into the holy place, and declares himself to be Jehovah God, he violates two religions. Three, really. Christian, Israeli, and Muslim. A Muslim would just go berserk for a human being to stand up and say he's God. So here you got three religions are going to go berserk because of one man who stands in the holy place. That's right in the middle of the menorah,
And
the incense, and the table of showbread.
And whose temple is he standing in? The Muslims or the?
He's in God's temple.
He's in the Jewish temple.
Jewish temple.
So that's something about that's going to draw the ire and the outrage of the
everybody.
Palestinian people.
Yep.
But listen, folks, we're going to wrap this up, but I can't tell you enough. Please keep your eye on this Abraham Accord as it draws more nations into it. This is exactly what is prophesied. in Daniel 9:27, where it says, and it's speaking of the Antichrist, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for a 7-year period. A week of years is what it says, a 7-year period. We are starting to see the many. We are starting to see this peace accord, and it just so happens he calls it the Abraham Accord, and we know that he was going to confirm the Abrahamic covenant.
Yep.
And so we're looking at this Abraham Accord, and we don't know which nation the Antichrist is going to come out of for sure, 100% for sure.
Yep.
So we don't know which one, but one of these European nations, when they start signing on to this, one of them will trigger the final 7 years. We just don't know which. But we'll start seeing prophecies that would be happening inside the final 7 years starting to happen.
Yep.
And so stay tuned for our next video. Keep an eye open for our podcasts as we can bring those to you a little more frequently. Thank you so much for joining us. Anything else?
Nope. Doing good.
We'll talk to you soon. God bless. Visit us
bless.
at prophecyviews.com.
Amen.